When 10-year-old Chris Crawford appeared at Clara's door, clutching his starving infant brother, he begged only for someone to nurse the baby. But the grieving widow saw two souls who needed saving, not just one. As she made the life-changing decision to take in both boys, little did Clara know that their father's dangerous past would soon come knocking, forcing her to choose between safety and the family she never expected to find. But will her newfound love be enough to protect them from the men who've come to collect? The baby's cry cut through the morning silence like a knife, weak and desperate, somewhere beyond Clara Hartwell's cabin door. She froze at her kitchen table, coffee cup halfway to her lips, listening to a sound that made her heart race with painful memories. No infant should sound like that, hollow, hungry, dying. Clara set down her cup with trembling hands and moved toward the window. The Kansas Territory stretched endless in all directions under the August sun of 1859. Golden grass bending in waves that reminded her of an ocean she'd never seen. She'd been sitting in this same spot every morning for 6 months, watching the world move on without her, while she stayed frozen in grief. The crying came again, closer now, mixed with the sound of stumbling footsteps. Clara grabbed the rifle from beside her door, her heart hammering as she peered through the glass. A small figure was walking toward her cabin, carrying something in his arms. She stepped outside, squinting against the bright sunlight. The figure was a boy, maybe 10 years old, dressed in clothes so torn and dirty they barely qualified as clothing anymore. His face was streaked with mud and tears, and in his trembling arms he held a bundle that moved with the weak protests of a very sick baby. "Help!" the boy called out when he saw her, his voice cracking like drought-stricken earth. "Please, lady, help us!" Clara's breath caught. She'd lost her own baby just days before he was born, and her husband James to consumption 6 months later. For half a year, she'd been avoiding anything that reminded her of what she'd lost. But something about this desperate child cut through all her careful walls. She set her rifle against the cabin wall and walked toward him. "What's wrong? Are you hurt?" The boy's eyes were too old for his face, filled with an exhaustion that spoke of terrible experiences. "My brother. He ain't eaten proper in days. Our ma died having him and pa." His voice broke completely. "The fever took pa last week. I don't know what else to do." Clara's heart clenched. Up close, she could see that the boy was nothing but skin and bones. His lips were cracked from thirst. His shirt had holes big enough to put her fist through, and the baby in his arms barely moved. These children were starving. "What's your name?" she asked gently. "Chris Crawford, ma'am. This here's Samuel." Billy's voice dropped to barely a whisper. "He's real sick. I heard tell you lost your own baby recent. Thought maybe you could." He swallowed hard, fear and hope warring in his eyes. "Feed him. I can work for his keep. I'm stronger than I look. I promise." The words hit Clara like a physical blow. Her body responded before her mind could protest. Milk that had nowhere to go, suddenly sharp and aching with purpose. She'd been producing food for a baby who would never need it. And here stood a child who was dying for lack of exactly what she had to give. "Billy, when did you last eat?" The boy's stomach answered before he could, growling like distant thunder. Clara saw herself then, as if from a great height. A woman who had been dying slowly, choosing to wither rather than bloom. Here stood two children who needed not her grief, but her strength. "How old is Samuel?" she asked, already reaching for the baby. "About 2 months, I think." Ma said he came early. Billy hesitated, then slowly passed his brother to her. "I tried everything I could think of. Cow's milk when I could find it, chewing up food and spitting it in his mouth like birds do. But he just keeps getting weaker." Samuel felt light as a feather in Clara's arms, his skin hot and dry with fever. She'd helped birth enough babies to recognize the signs. He was severely dehydrated and probably hadn't had proper nutrition since his mother died. But he was still alive, still fighting, and that gave her hope. "Billy, I need you to listen carefully. I can help Samuel, but there are some things I need to know first. Are you in any kind of danger?" Billy's face went pale, and he glanced nervously over his shoulder at the empty prairie. Pa owed money to some bad men. Before he died, he made me swear to take Samuel and run if they came looking. He said they might try to sell us to pay his debts. Clara felt ice form in her stomach. What kind of men? The kind that don't take no for an answer. Billy's voice shook. Pa was real scared of them. And Pa wasn't scared of much. He told me to find good people and stay hidden. Said Samuel and me, we're all each other got now. Clara looked down at Samuel's tiny face, then back at Billy's desperate one. In that moment, she made a decision that would change all their lives. For the first time since James died, she felt truly alive, filled with purpose that had nothing to do with her own pain. Then it settled, she said, surprising herself with the certainty in her voice. You're both coming inside. We'll get Samuel fed, and then we'll figure out how to keep you safe. Billy's eyes widened. Ma'am, I only asked about Samuel. A baby needs his brother, Clara replied, already walking toward the cabin. And I need something to fight for. As they crossed the threshold into her home, Clara felt something shift inside her chest. Not healing exactly, but recognition. 3 broken pieces that might somehow form something whole. Clara's kitchen had never felt so full of life. Samuel lay sleeping peacefully in a basket lined with soft blankets, his breathing steady and strong after nursing for the first time in days. Billy sat at her table, working his way through his second bowl of vegetable soup with the focused intensity of someone who'd forgotten what it felt like to have enough food. Slow down, Clara warned gently. You'll make yourself sick eating too fast after going without for so long. Billy paused, spoon halfway to his mouth, and gave her a sheepish grin. Sorry, ma'am. It's just, this is the best thing I've tasted in weeks, maybe months. Clara felt her heart squeeze. She'd made the soup from vegetables in her own garden, nothing fancy, but to this starving boy it was a feast. There's plenty more where that came from. You don't have to eat like someone's going to take it away. Old habits, Billy said quietly. Pa used to get real angry when Samuel cried during his card games. Said crying babies made him lose his concentration. So I learned to keep Samuel quiet and stay out of the way when Pa was in one of his moods. Clara set down her own spoon, studying Billy's face. There were faint marks on his arms that looked suspiciously like finger bruises, and the way he flinched when she moved too quickly told its own story. Billy, did your father hurt you? Billy's shoulders hunched defensively. Pa wasn't always bad. When Ma was alive, he was different. He used to read me stories and teach me about the stars. His voice grew smaller. It was only after she died that he started drinking heavy and staying out all night gambling. That doesn't excuse him hurting you. He never hit Samuel, Billy said quickly. I made sure of that. And when he was sober, sometimes he was almost like the old Pa again. He'd get all sorry and promise things would be different. Billy's eyes filled with tears. I kept believing him because I wanted my real Pa back so bad. Clara reached across the table and covered Billy's hand with hers. You did everything you could to protect your brother. That took real courage. I should have done more. I should have taken Samuel and left sooner, but I kept hoping. Billy wiped his eyes with his free hand. Then Pa got the fever, and at the end, when he knew he was dying, he grabbed my shirt and made me promise to keep Samuel safe no matter what. He said Black Pete Donovan would come collecting, and if he couldn't get his money, he'd take it out in trade. Who's Black Pete Donovan? Billy's face went white. He runs a saloon in Lawrence, but folks say he makes most of his money from things that ain't legal. Pa said Pete don't take kindly to people who can't pay their debts. He told me Pete's got ways of making boys our age earn money, and none of it's anything children should have to do. Clara felt sick. She'd heard whispers about men like Black Pete, predators who preyed on desperate families. The thought of this brave little boy and innocent baby falling into such hands made her blood boil. How much did your father owe him? Near $200, maybe more with interest. Pa kept gambling, kept losing, kept owing more. Billy's voice dropped to a whisper. 3 days after we buried Pa, 3 men came to our place asking questions. I grabbed Samuel and ran out the back while they were pounding on the front door. Have you seen them since? Billy nodded miserably. Yesterday they stopped at the Morrison farm. I was hiding in their cornfield with Samuel when they rode up. Mrs. Morrison told them she hadn't seen us, but I could tell she was scared. They said they'd be checking every farm in the territory until they found us. Clara stood up abruptly, pacing to the window to look out at the empty prairie. The Morrison farm was only 5 miles away. If these men were systematically searching homesteads, it was only a matter of time before they reached her cabin. Billy, I want you to listen to me very carefully. She turned back to face him, her voice calm but determined. Those men are not going to take you, not while I'm breathing. Billy's eyes went wide. But ma'am, you don't understand how dangerous they are. What if they hurt you because you helped us? I couldn't live with myself if… Chris Crawford, look at me. Clara waited until his eyes met hers. 6 months ago, I lost my husband to consumption. Before that, I lost my baby, before he even had a chance to take his first breath. For half a year, I've been walking around like a ghost, just waiting to join them. Billy's mouth fell open at her raw honesty. But today, you and Samuel gave me something I thought I'd never have again. A reason to fight. A reason to live. Clara's voice grew stronger with each word. I'm not about to let anyone take that away from me. You really mean that? I've got a big house, a good piece of land, and more love in my heart than I know what to do with. If you'll have me, I'd like to be more than just someone who helps you through a rough patch. I'd like to be your family. Billy stared at her for a long moment, hope and disbelief warring in his young face. Then his tough mask crumbled completely, and he threw his arms around her waist. Yes, ma'am. More than anything in the world. As Clara held the boy close, she heard the distant sound of horses approaching. Her blood turned to ice as she realized their peaceful moment was about to be tested in ways she'd never imagined. The baby's tiny fingers wrapped around Clara's thumb with surprising strength, as if he knew this moment would decide whether he lived or died. Clara's milk came down hard and fast, her body remembering what her mind had tried to forget. She hadn't held a child since her own son had slipped away in the night, cold and still in her arms. What happened to your parents, Billy? Clara asked softly, as Samuel latched on, his desperate sucking finally easing into steady rhythm. Billy shifted from foot to foot, his eyes darting toward the door like a rabbit ready to bolt. Ma died having him. Lost too much blood, the doc said. His voice cracked. Pa, he tried real hard at first, but the drink took hold of him something fierce. Clara watched the boy's face carefully. There was more to this story, something dark hiding behind his careful words. Where's your pa now, Billy? Dead. The word came out flat and final. Fever got him last week. But Clara noticed how Billy's hands trembled when he said it, how his eyes wouldn't meet hers. She had seen enough death on the frontier to know what fever looked like, and she had also seen what fear looked like. Chris Crawford was scared of something much worse than being alone. Samuel made a small, contented sound as he fed. Clara felt something crack open inside her chest, not breaking, but blooming. For 6 months, her body had ached with milk that had nowhere to go. Now, feeling this tiny life depend on her, she remembered what it meant to be needed. Billy, when did you last have a proper meal? The boy's stomach answered with a loud growl that made his cheeks burn red. Day before yesterday, I reckon. Maybe longer. Clara's heart squeezed tight. There's leftover stew on the stove, and fresh bread from this morning. Billy's eyes went wide. I can't pay you nothing, ma'am. Don't have a penny to my name. Did I ask for money? Clara stood carefully, keeping Samuel secure in her arms. A hungry child doesn't need to earn the right to eat. Chris Crawford. As Billy moved toward the kitchen, Clara noticed how he favored his left leg slightly, and how his shirt hung loose over ribs that showed too clearly. These boys hadn't just been hungry for a few days. They had been surviving on scraps for much longer. Billy, she called out as he reached for a bowl. How long has it really been since your pa died?" The boy froze, his hand halfway to the shelf. When he turned around, tears were streaming down his dirty cheeks. 3 weeks, he whispered. Maybe 4. I've been trying to keep Samuel alive, but I don't know nothing about babies. I thought he was gonna die, ma'am. I thought I was gonna watch him die. Just like what, Billy? Just like I watched Pa die. The words tumbled out in a rush. But it weren't no fever that killed him, ma'am. It was men. Bad men who said he owed them money from gambling. They hurt him real bad, and when he couldn't pay, Billy's voice broke completely. Clara felt ice water run through her veins. Are these men still around, Billy? Don't know. Maybe. That's why I've been hiding with Samuel in the old Tucker cabin by the creek. But it's got holes in the roof, and Samuel started getting sick, and I didn't know what else to do. Samuel had finished feeding and was making sleepy sounds against Clara's shoulder. She looked down at his tiny face, then back at Billy, who was trying to eat stew while tears ran down his cheeks. In that moment, Clara made a decision that surprised her with its certainty. Billy, how would you feel about staying here? Both of you? Billy nearly choked on his stew. Ma'am? I lost my baby 6 months ago. My husband before that. This house has been too quiet for too long. Clara sat down across from him, Samuel warm and solid in her arms. A baby needs his brother. And maybe I need both of you. More than I realized. You'd really keep us? Billy's voice was barely a whisper. Even knowing about Pa's trouble? Clara looked at this brave boy who had kept his baby brother alive through weeks of hunger and fear. Especially knowing about it. Family protects family, Billy. That's what we do. For the first time since he had appeared at her door, Billy smiled. It transformed his whole face, making him look like the child he should have been all along. There's just one thing, ma'am, Billy said, suddenly serious again. If those men come looking, they ain't gonna care that you're helping us. They'll hurt you too. Clara adjusted Samuel in her arms, feeling his steady heartbeat against her chest. Then, we'll face that when it comes. But tonight, you're both safe. Tonight, you're both home. As evening fell over the Kansas prairie, Clara found herself moving through routines she had forgotten. Making up a bed for Billy in the small room off the kitchen. Finding clean clothes that might fit him, showing him where everything was kept. Miss Clara, Billy said as she tucked him in, Samuel sleeping peacefully in a drawer, lined with soft blankets beside the bed. Why are you being so kind to us? You don't even know us. Clara smoothed the boy's clean hair back from his forehead. Sometimes kindness isn't about knowing someone, Billy. Sometimes it's about recognizing something in them that matches something in yourself. What do you mean? We're all 3 of us lost, in different ways. But maybe together, we can find our way home. Billy nodded sleepily, his eyes already closing. Miss Clara, can I call you Ma if I want to? Clara's throat tightened with emotion. I'd like that very much, Billy. As she blew out the lamp and settled into her own bed across the hall, Clara marveled at how much her world had changed in a single day. This morning, she had been a woman with nothing left to live for. Tonight, she was someone's Ma again. But even as contentment settled over her like a warm blanket, a small voice in the back of her mind whispered warnings. Billy's father's troubles might not be buried with him. And if dangerous men came looking for those boys, would her love be enough to protect them? 3 weeks later, Clara woke to the sound of Samuel giggling, a sound that had become as precious to her as morning coffee. She found Billy in the kitchen, making funny faces while feeding his brother oatmeal, most of which was ending up on both their faces instead of in Samuel's mouth. Good morning, you 2 troublemakers, Clara said, tying on her apron. The kitchen felt alive again, full of the kind of happy chaos she had forgotten existed. Morning, Ma, Billy said, grinning. The word still sent warmth flooding through Clara's chest every time he used it. Samuel banged his spoon on his high chair and babbled something that sounded almost like Mama, making Clara's heart skip. Billy, after breakfast, we need to ride into town for supplies. Clara said, starting the coffee. Mrs. Henderson at the general store has been asking about you boys. Billy's face darkened slightly. What kind of asking? The good kind. She wants to know if you need anything. Maybe some proper clothes that fit. Clara noticed how Billy still tensed whenever she mentioned going to town. Billy, is there something you're not telling me about those men who hurt your paw? Before Billy could answer, Samuel started fussing, reaching his sticky hands toward Clara. She lifted him from the high chair, and he immediately settled against her shoulder with a contented sigh. They weren't from around here, Billy said quietly. They came from Dodge City, I think. Had fancy clothes and mean eyes. Dodge City is 3 days' ride from here, Billy. Even if they were still looking, they wouldn't think to search this far. But Clara noticed how Billy kept glancing toward the windows as they got ready for town. How he insisted on bringing his pa's old hunting knife tucked carefully into his boot. The ride to town took an hour, with Samuel bundled snug in Clara's arms and Billy riding alert beside them on the old mare. Clara pointed out landmarks and told stories about the early days of settlement, trying to ease the tension that still gripped the boy whenever they left their safe little homestead. Town was busier than usual for a Wednesday morning. The arrival of a new family from back east had everyone talking and trading news. Clara hitched the wagon outside Henderson's general store and gathered Samuel in his basket. Mrs. Hartwell! Mrs. Henderson called out the moment they walked in. And these must be your boys I've been hearing about. Clara felt a warm glow at the words, your boys. Yes, this is Billy and little Samuel. Mrs. Henderson was a round, cheerful woman who had never met a child she didn't want to feed cookies to. She bustled over with a plate of molasses cookies and a warm smile. Billy, isn't it? My goodness, you're a handsome young man, and so grown up, helping care for your baby brother like that. Billy ducked his head, unused to praise, but Clara saw how his shoulders straightened slightly. Now then, Mrs. Henderson continued, let's see about getting you some proper clothes. Growing boys need sturdy things. As Mrs. Henderson measured Billy for new shirts and pants, Clara bounced Samuel on her hip and listened to the chatter of other customers. Most of it was harmless gossip. Who was courting whom? Whose crops were doing best? Complaints about the unseasonably warm weather. But then she heard something that made her blood run cold. 3 men rode through yesterday asking questions. Old Mr. Peterson was saying to the blacksmith, looking for a couple of boys, they said. Offered good money for information. Clara's grip tightened on Samuel, who gurgled happily, unaware of any danger. What kind of questions? The blacksmith asked. About 2 boys, one maybe 10 or so, the other just a baby. Said their names were Crawford. Claimed to be relatives looking to take them in. Clara glanced over at Billy, who had gone very still. His face was pale, but his jaw was set with determination that looked too old for his years. Did you tell them anything? The blacksmith pressed. Course not, mister. Peterson snorted. Didn't like the look of them. Too fancy for honest work, if you know what I mean. Besides, I ain't seen any Crawford boys around here. Clara felt a mixture of relief and growing worry. The men were close, closer than she had hoped they would ever be. Billy, she said quietly, we need to finish our shopping and head home. But Billy was already moving, his hand instinctively checking for the knife in his boot. Yes, ma'am. Mrs. Henderson wrapped up their purchases quickly, sensing the change in mood. You folks take care now, she said, pressing an extra bag of cookies into Billy's hands. The ride home felt endless. Clara kept Samuel close, while Billy rode with his eyes constantly scanning the horizon. Neither of them spoke much, but Clara could feel the fear radiating off the boy like heat from a stove. Ma, Billy said finally, when they were almost home, what if they come to our place? Clara looked at this brave boy, who had already survived more than any child should have to. Then we'll face it together, Billy. That's what families do. But privately, Clara was making plans. The old root cellar behind the house could hide a baby if needed. And James's rifle was still loaded and ready above the fireplace. She had never shot at a person before, But for these boys, her boys, she would do whatever was necessary. As they pulled into their yard, Samuel babbling happily in her arms, and Billy helping unload their supplies, Clara made a silent promise. These men could threaten and search and offer all the money they wanted, but they would not take her children. Not while she still drew breath. The sun was setting behind their little cabin, painting everything in shades of gold and red. It looked like any other peaceful evening on the frontier, but Clara knew that sometimes the most beautiful sunsets came before the worst storm, and she could feel the storm coming. The sound of iron horseshoes striking frozen ground shattered the morning peace like breaking glass. Clara's coffee cup trembled in her hands as she peered through the frost-covered window, her heart already knowing what her eyes confirmed. 3 riders approached through the silver mist, their dark coats flapping like the wings of carrion birds. "Billy," she whispered urgently, never taking her gaze from the approaching figures. "Take Samuel to the root cellar. Now." The boy's face went white as fresh snow. "It's them, ain't it?" The men Pa was afraid of. Clara's mind raced faster than her thundering pulse. She had heard whispers in town about men who collected debts with interest paid in blood and bone. Men who viewed children as nothing more than working hands to be sold to the highest bidder. "Listen to me carefully," Clara said, gripping Billy's shoulders. "No matter what happens, you keep Samuel quiet. If things go badly, you take him and run to the Peterson farm. Tell them Clara sent you." Billy's jaw set with the same stubborn determination she had grown to love. "I ain't leaving you to face them alone." "You are if I say so." Clara's voice carried steel wrapped in velvet. "Your job is protecting your brother. Mine is protecting both of you." The riders pulled up outside, their horses snorting clouds of steam in the crisp air. Clara watched through the window as the leader dismounted, a tall man with silver threading through his black beard and eyes like chips of winter ice. His companions remained on horseback, hands resting casually on their gun handles. The knock came sharp and commanding, 3 heavy blows that seemed to shake the entire cabin. Clara smoothed her dress and checked her reflection in the small mirror by the door. Her face looked pale but determined. She thought of James, of how he would have stood between danger and his family without hesitation. Today, that courage would have to live in her. "Mrs. Hartwell." The man's voice carried the authority of someone used to getting his way. "I believe we need to talk." Clara opened the door just wide enough to show her face. "I'm afraid you have me at a disadvantage, Mr. Blackwood." Silas Blackwood. He touched the brim of his hat in a gesture that somehow managed to feel more threatening than polite. "I represent certain business interests that had dealings with the late Mr. Crawford." "I see. And what business would that be?" Blackwood's smile never reached his eyes. "The kind that doesn't end with death, Mrs. Hartwell. Crawford owed my employers a considerable sum. Gambling debts, you understand? Money borrowed against future earnings that now must be collected from his assets." Clara's blood turned to ice water. "Assets?" "His boys, ma'am. Young Billy's old enough to work a mine or a mill. The baby." Blackwood shrugged as if discussing livestock. "Well, there's always folks looking for infants to raise as they see fit." The casual cruelty in his voice made Clara's stomach turn. She thought of Samuel's trusting blue eyes, of Billy's fierce protectiveness, of the way they had brought light back into her dark world. "Those children are under my care now," she said, proud that her voice didn't shake. "I intend to adopt them legally." Blackwood chuckled, a sound like grinding stones. "Now that's real noble of you, ma'am. But the law's a funny thing. See, Crawford signed papers before he died. Legal documents that give my employers first claim on anything of value he left behind." He reached inside his coat and pulled out a folded paper, yellowed with age and stained with what might have been whiskey or blood. Clara didn't want to know which. "This here's a proper contract, witnessed and signed. Says if Crawford couldn't pay his debts, his children would work them off." Blackwood's eyes glittered with malicious satisfaction. "At $2 a month, minus room and board. It'll only take about, 15 years to clear the debt." Clara's world tilted sideways. 15 years. Billy would be a broken man by then. And Samuel. She couldn't even think about what 15 years in the mines would do to a child. "That's slavery," she whispered. "That's business," Blackwood corrected. "Now, we can do this easy or we can do it hard. Your choice." From somewhere behind her, Clara heard the faint creak of floorboards. Billy was moving toward the front room, probably unable to resist listening. She had to end this conversation before he did something foolish and brave. "I need time to consider," she said. Blackwood's face hardened like cooling iron. "Time's the one thing Crawford's boys don't have, ma'am. We leave for the Montana mines at first light tomorrow." With or without your blessing, Clara felt something fierce and protective rise in her chest. Something that had nothing to do with gentle widowhood and everything to do with the lioness defending her cubs. "Then I suppose you'll be leaving without them," she said quietly. The change in Blackwood's expression was immediate and terrifying. His hand moved toward the gun at his hip with practiced ease. "Mrs. Hartwell, I'd hate for this to get unpleasant, but those boys are coming with us, one way or another." The silence stretched between them like a taut wire ready to snap. Clara could hear her own heartbeat thundering in her ears, could smell the leather and gunpowder scent that clung to Blackwood like a second skin. Behind her, she sensed Billy's presence, probably crouched by the doorway to the kitchen. Samuel clutched in his protective arms. "You seem like a reasonable woman," Blackwood continued, his voice taking on a deceptively gentle tone. "Surely you understand that business is business. These boys mean nothing to you, just charity cases you took in out of the goodness of your heart." Clara lifted her chin, meeting his cold stare with steady eyes. "Mr. Blackwood, I think you misunderstand what these children mean to me." "Oh, I understand perfectly." His smile was sharp as a blade. "You lost a baby, got all motherly over the first strays that wandered to your door. It's natural enough, but charity has its limits, and this is where yours ends." The casual dismissal of her love, of the bond she had forged with Billy and Samuel, hit Clara like a physical blow. But it also ignited something deeper, a fury that burned away fear and left only fierce determination. "Those boys are my sons now," she said, each word clear and unshakable. "And no power on earth will make me give them up." Blackwood's facade of politeness cracked like ice in spring. "Lady, you're making a mistake that's going to cost you more than you can afford. The only mistake here is yours, thinking I'll hand over 2 innocent children to satisfy a dead man's gambling debts." Behind Blackwood, his 2 companions shifted restlessly in their saddles. One of them, a younger man with nervous eyes, looked uncomfortable with the direction the conversation was taking. The other, older and scarred, watched Clara with the patient attention of a predator sizing up prey. "You got family, Mrs. Hartwell?" Blackwood asked, his tone now openly threatening. "People who might worry if something happened to you out here? This is lonely country. Accidents happen all the time." Clara's blood ran cold, but her voice remained steady. "Are you threatening me, Mr. Blackwood?" "Just pointing out facts. A woman alone, no husband, no protection. Well, it's a dangerous world for someone in your position." From the kitchen came the soft sound of Samuel starting to fuss, his hungry cry muffled but audible. Billy would be trying to keep him quiet, probably terrified that any sound might bring disaster down on their heads. Clara made her decision in that instant. Whatever happened next, she would not let fear rule her actions. She had been afraid too long, already afraid of living, afraid of loving, afraid of hoping. These men fed on fear like vultures on carrion. But she was done being prey. "Mr. Blackwood," she said, stepping fully into the doorway so he could see her clearly, "I want you and your friends to turn around and ride away from my property. Those children are staying with me, and that's the end of it." Blackwood's face flushed red with anger. "You stupid woman. Do you have any idea who you're crossing? My employers don't take kindly to people who interfere with their business." "Then perhaps your employers should have thought of that before they gave money to a desperate father with more gambling addiction than sense." The insult hit its mark. Blackwood's hand moved to his gun, his fingers wrapping around the handle, with obvious intent. That's when Billy appeared in the doorway beside Clara. James's old hunting rifle steady in his small hands, despite the tremor in his voice. "You heard her, mister. Time for you to leave." Clara's heart nearly stopped. "Billy? No. Pa taught me to shoot before the drink took his mind," Billy said, his young voice carrying surprising authority. "I can put a bullet through a rabbit at 50 yards. At this distance, I won't miss." Blackwood laughed, but Clara heard the nervous edge in it. "Boy, you don't want to point that weapon at grown men. Someone might get hurt." "That's the idea," Billy replied grimly. The scarred rider's hand moved toward his gun, but Blackwood held up a restraining gesture. His calculating eyes moved from Billy to Clara and back again, clearly reassessing the situation. "This isn't over," he said finally. "We'll be back, and next time we won't be so polite about it. Next time," Clara said quietly, "bring the sheriff with you. I'm sure he'd be interested in seeing that contract of yours, especially the part about using children to pay off gambling debts." For the first time, uncertainty flickered across Blackwood's face. Clara pressed her advantage. "You see, Mr. Blackwood, I may be just a widow, but my late husband was well respected in this territory. People remember James Hartwell, and they remember his kindness. They also remember mine." She paused, letting the words sink in. "How do you think the good people of Kansas Territory would feel about men who steal children to work in mines?" The younger rider spoke for the first time, his voice tight with worry. "Silas, maybe we should—" "Shut up, Pete," Blackwood snapped. But Clara saw doubt creeping into his eyes, saw him realize that this wasn't going to be as simple as intimidating a defenseless widow. "3 days," Blackwood said finally. "You have 3 days to reconsider. After that," he let the threat hang in the air like smoke. "After that, you'll find the sheriff waiting for you," Clara replied calmly. Blackwood's jaw worked like he was chewing nails, but he stepped back toward his horse. "This ain't finished, lady. Not by a long shot." As the 3 men rode away, Clara finally allowed herself to breathe. Beside her, Billy lowered the rifle with shaking hands. "Miss Clara," he whispered, "what if they come back at night? What if they bring more men?" Clara put her arm around the boy's shoulders, drawing strength from his warmth and courage. "Then we'll be ready for them, Billy. But first, we need to get to town and talk to Sheriff Morrison." From the kitchen came Samuel's increasingly urgent cries. Clara smiled, despite the fear still coursing through her veins. Life had a way of demanding attention, even in the midst of crisis. "Come on," she said, leading Billy inside. "Let's take care of your brother, and then we'll take care of everything else." But even as she spoke the words, Clara couldn't shake the feeling that Silas Blackwood was not a man who gave up easily. The next 3 days would test everything she thought she knew about courage, family, and the lengths a person would go to protect the ones they loved. Outside, storm clouds were gathering on the horizon, and Clara found herself wondering if they were a sign of the weather to come or something far more dangerous. The sound of horses leaving echoed across the empty prairie like thunder rolling away after a storm. Clara's hands shook as she bolted the cabin door, her heart still racing from the dangerous game they had just played. 3 hours had passed since Marshal Hendricks and his men rode up demanding the Crawford boys, but it felt like a lifetime. Billy sat hunched over the kitchen table, his small fingers wrapped around a tin cup of warm milk that Clara had heated on the stove. His face looked older than his 10 years, marked by worry lines that no child should carry. Samuel lay sleeping in the wooden cradle that James had built years ago, his tiny chest rising and falling in peaceful rhythm, unaware of how close he had come to being torn from the only family he had ever known. "Miss Clara," Billy whispered, his voice barely louder than the crackling fire. "What's that paper the judge brought?" Clara smoothed the official document with trembling hands. The territorial judge had arrived just after the marshal left, carrying news that changed everything. "It's a writ of temporary custody," she explained, sitting down beside the boy. It means you and Samuel can stay with me while the court decides what's best. Billy's eyes grew wide. What if they decide we can't stay? What if they take us anyway? The fear in his voice cut through Clara like a knife. She had seen that same terror in her own mirror during the dark months after James died, when each sunrise felt like a punishment instead of a gift. Now she understood that sometimes courage meant protecting others from the darkness that lived inside your own heart. Billy, look at me. She waited until his frightened eyes met hers. I made a promise when I took you boys in. Family doesn't break promises. Outside, the wind picked up, whistling through the gaps in the cabin walls. Clara rose to check the fire, adding another log to keep the chill away. As she worked, she noticed Billy watching her every move, with the intensity of someone trying to memorize everything about a moment. Why did you really say yes that first day? Billy asked suddenly. When I asked you to feed Samuel, you could have just given us some food and sent us away. Why did you let us stay? Clara paused, poker in hand, staring into the orange flames. How could she explain to a child that sometimes saving someone else was the only way to save yourself? That his desperate plea had awakened something in her that grief had nearly killed? When your mama passed, what did you miss most about her? Clara asked instead. Billy thought for a long moment. The way she hummed while she cooked breakfast made the whole house feel warm, even in winter. That's what I missed after losing James and our baby, Clara said softly. The feeling that our home was alive. You and Samuel brought that back. A small cry came from the cradle. Samuel was waking up, his little fists pushing against his blanket. Clara lifted him gently, feeling the familiar tug in her chest as he rooted against her shoulder, searching for comfort. He's getting stronger, Billy observed, moving closer to watch his brother. Remember how tiny he looked that first day? I thought. His voice trailed off. You thought he might not make it, Clara finished gently. But you didn't give up on him. That's what brothers do. Billy's hand reached out to stroke Samuel's soft hair. Pa used to say that family was the most important thing in the world. But then after Ma died, he forgot how to act like family mattered. Clara settled into her rocking chair with Samuel, beginning the gentle motion that always soothed him. Grief makes people do strange things, Billy. Sometimes it makes them push away the very people who could help them heal. Is that why you stayed alone so long after your husband died? The question caught Clara off guard with its simple honesty. Billy had a way of seeing straight to the heart of things that surprised her. Yes, she admitted. I was so afraid of losing someone again that I forgot how good it felt to love someone. Samuel made soft cooing sounds as he nursed, his eyes drifting closed in contentment. Clara marveled at how natural this felt now, how her body had remembered its purpose after months of emptiness. Miss Clara, what happens tomorrow? Tomorrow we start living like a real family, Clara replied. You'll help me with the morning chores. We'll work in the garden together. I'll teach you to read better, and you can show me more about caring for the animals. Billy's face brightened for the first time since the marshal's visit. You want me to teach you things? Everyone has something valuable to share, Billy. Your pa may have forgotten that, but it doesn't make it less true. The boy straightened his shoulders, looking suddenly proud. I know lots about horses, and I can track animals real good. Pa taught me before he got so sick with the drinking. Then you'll be our tracker and horse expert, Clara decided. Every family needs someone who understands animals. As night deepened around them, Clara found herself thinking about the marshal's cold eyes and harsh words. Men like that saw children as property, to be moved around like cattle. But sitting here with Billy and Samuel, she felt a fierce protectiveness rise in her chest that surprised her with its strength. Billy, there's something else we need to talk about, she said carefully. The marshal mentioned your father owed money to some people. Do you know anything about that? Billy's face went pale again. He stared at his hands for a long moment before speaking. Pa played cards most nights after Ma died, lost more than he won. There were men who came to the house sometimes, looking angry. Pa would give them whatever money we had for food. Clara's heart ached for the fear this child had lived with. Those men won't find you here, Billy. And even if they did, they'd have to go through me first. You'd really fight for us? The simple question carried so much hope and disbelief that Clara felt tears spring to her eyes. Chris Crawford, I would move mountains for you and your brother. That's what mothers do. The word mother hung in the air between them like a bridge, being built one plank at a time. Clara had never expected to use that word again, had buried it along with her dreams of children running through these rooms. Samuel had finished nursing and fallen asleep in her arms. His peaceful face reminded Clara of the baby she had lost. But instead of bringing pain, the similarity brought comfort. Love didn't replace love, she realized. It simply found new ways to grow. Miss Clara? Billy's voice was getting sleepy now. When I was little, Ma used to sing me to sleep. Could you maybe sing something? For both of us? Clara's throat tightened with emotion. She had forgotten that she used to love singing, had forgotten many things about the woman she had been before grief changed her. But looking at Billy's hopeful face, she found her voice again. Softly, she began to hum an old hymn her own mother had sung years ago. The melody filled the cabin like warm honey, wrapping around them all. Billy's eyes grew heavy as he listened, his head nodding toward the table. Come on, Clara whispered. Let's get you to bed properly. She helped Billy to the small cot they had set up in the main room, tucking the quilts around him like armor against bad dreams. Samuel went into his cradle with barely a whimper, content and safe. As Clara banked the fire for the night, she caught sight of herself in the darkened window glass. The woman looking back at her was different from the hollow-eyed widow who had answered Billy's desperate plea weeks ago. This woman had purpose burning in her eyes, had found a reason to keep breathing that went beyond mere survival. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. The marshal might return with more legal papers. Winter was coming, and they would need more supplies. There would be difficult conversations about the past and uncertain plans for the future. But tonight, they were family. Tonight, that was enough. Morning sunlight streamed through the cabin windows like liquid gold, warming Clara's face as she stood at the stove preparing breakfast. 6 months had passed since that terrifying day when Marshal Hendricks tried to take her boys away, and spring had transformed the Kansas prairie into a carpet of wildflowers and new grass. The adoption papers lay safely stored in her wooden chest, making official what their hearts had known from the very beginning. Mama, watch me! Samuel's excited voice rang across the yard as he took wobbly steps toward the chicken coop, his chubby legs carrying him forward with pure determination. At 18 months old, he was walking more confidently each day, his personality blooming like the flowers that dotted their land. Clara smiled as she watched through the window, her heart swelling with pride and joy. The baby who had been so weak and hungry was now a bright, healthy toddler with James's blue eyes and a smile that could melt winter snow. He clapped his hands together as 3 chickens scattered away from his approaching footsteps, delighted by the chaos he created. Samuel, don't chase the chickens too hard, Billy called out, his voice carrying the patient authority of a big brother. At 11 now, Billy had grown taller and stronger, his shoulders broader from months of farm work and regular meals. The hollow-cheeked, frightened boy who had appeared at her door was now a confident young man who took his role as Samuel's protector seriously. Clara poured pancake batter onto the hot griddle, listening to the happy sounds of her sons playing outside. The rhythm of normal family life still amazed her sometimes. After so many months of silence and sorrow, the cabin now bubbled with laughter, questions, arguments over toys, and the 1,000 small moments that made a house into a home. Billy, come help your brother before he gets himself covered in mud, Clara called through the open door. Yes, Mama, Billy replied, jogging over to scoop Samuel into his arms. The little boy squealed with delight, wrapping his arms around his brother's neck in a fierce hug. The word Mama still sent warmth shooting through Clara's chest every time she heard it. Samuel had been calling her that for months now, but Billy had only started using it recently, shyly at first, then with growing confidence. The day he first said it, Clara had cried happy tears, while pretending to have something in her eye. As Billy carried Samuel toward the cabin, Clara noticed a rider approaching from the east. Her heart jumped with momentary fear, old habits from those dangerous weeks when every stranger might be a threat. But as the figure drew closer, she recognized Mrs. Henderson from town, riding side saddle on her gentle mare. "Morning, Clara," Mrs. Henderson called out as she dismounted near the front porch. "I hope you don't mind me stopping by unannounced." "Of course not," Clara replied, wiping her hands on her apron. "Billy, would you watch Samuel for a few minutes while I visit with Mrs. Henderson?" The older woman's face was flushed with excitement as she stepped onto the porch. "Clara, I have the most wonderful news. The Territorial School Board is looking for a new teacher for the fall term. They've asked me to recommend someone, and I immediately thought of you." Clara's eyebrows rose in surprise. "Me? But Mrs. Henderson, I'm not qualified to—" "Nonsense," the woman interrupted with a wave of her hand. "You taught Sunday school back before your troubles, and everyone knows how well educated you are. Besides, look how beautifully you're raising those boys. Billy's reading has improved remarkably since he's been with you." The idea sent a thrill of possibility through Clara's mind. Teaching had always called to her, even during the dark months when nothing seemed to matter. The thought of helping other children learn and grow felt like another piece of her old self clicking back into place. "Where would the school be?" Clara asked carefully. "Right here in Liberty Creek, in the new building they're constructing near the church. It would mean a steady income for your family, and you could bring Samuel with you until he's older." Clara glanced back at her boys, who were now sitting on the kitchen floor, building towers with wooden blocks that Billy had carved during the long winter evenings. Samuel knocked over each tower with delighted giggles, while Billy patiently rebuilt them again and again. "I'll need to think about it," Clara said finally, "and discuss it with Billy. This affects his life too." Mrs. Henderson nodded approvingly. "That's exactly the kind of thoughtful approach that makes you perfect for teaching. The position starts in September, so you have time to decide." After Mrs. Henderson left, Clara sat on her front steps, watching Billy teach Samuel how to stack the blocks more carefully. The baby's concentration was adorable as he tried to balance one block on top of another, his tongue poking out slightly with effort. "Billy," Clara called softly, "can you come here for a minute? I want to talk to you about something." Billy settled Samuel with his blocks and walked over, settling beside Clara on the wooden steps. "What is it, Mama?" Clara explained about the teaching opportunity, watching Billy's face carefully for his reaction. "What do you think? Would you be proud to have a teacher for a mother?" Billy's eyes lit up with excitement. "You mean you'd be teaching other kids like you teach me? About reading and numbers and geography?" "Exactly like that. But it would mean changes for our family. I'd be busier during the day, and we'd need to plan our time differently." Billy was quiet for a moment, thinking seriously about the decision. Clara loved how he considered important matters carefully, never rushing to judgment. It was a trait that would serve him well as he grew into a man. "Would we still have our morning time together?" Billy asked finally. "When you help me with my lessons before Samuel wakes up?" "Absolutely," Clara promised. "That time is too precious to give up." "Then I think you should do it," Billy decided. "You're the smartest person I know, and other kids deserve to learn from you too." Clara's heart swelled with pride at his mature response. "And you'd help me with Samuel during the busy times?" "Of course," Billy replied, as if the question was silly. "We're a team, aren't we?" As if he understood the conversation, Samuel toddled over to them, clutching his favorite wooden block. He plopped down between Clara and Billy, babbling happily in the mixture of real words and baby talk that made them both laugh. "Look at him," Billy said fondly, ruffling his brother's hair. "Remember how scared I was that first day? I thought for sure he was going to die." Clara remembered that desperate morning clearly, Billy's hollow eyes, Samuel's weak cries, her own broken heart that somehow found room for two more souls to love. "You saved his life by bringing him here, Billy. Never forget that." "No," Billy replied, his voice serious beyond his years. We all saved each other. The simple truth of his words hit Clara like sunshine breaking through clouds. He was right. They had rescued each other from different kinds of emptiness. Billy and Samuel had given her purpose and joy again, while she had provided them with safety, love, and the promise of a future. As evening approached, Clara prepared supper, while her boys played quietly nearby. Samuel had discovered the joy of banging pots with wooden spoons, creating a chaotic symphony that somehow sounded like music to Clara's ears. Billy worked on his reading, sounding out words from the newspaper that a neighbor had brought by earlier in the week. "Mama," Billy said suddenly, looking up from his paper, "there's an article here about families moving west to California. It says some people are starting new lives out there." Clara paused in her stirring, sensing something deeper in his comment. "Are you thinking about moving west, Billy?" The boy shook his head quickly. "No, ma'am. I was just thinking about how we started our new life right here. We didn't need to go anywhere else." Clara felt her eyes fill with tears of gratitude. Here in this simple cabin, surrounded by the endless Kansas prairie, they had indeed built something beautiful from the broken pieces of their separate sorrows. After supper, Clara sat in her rocking chair with Samuel on her lap, reading him a picture book, while Billy worked on whittling a new toy horse. The lamplight cast warm shadows on the walls, and the fire crackled contentedly in the hearth. "Mama," Samuel said suddenly, pointing at the book's illustration of a family. "Datas." Clara's breath caught. It was the first time Samuel had identified them as a complete unit, a real family. Billy looked up from his carving, his face glowing with happiness. "Yes, sweetheart," Clara whispered, kissing the top of Samuel's head. "That's us." As she tucked her boys into their beds that night, Clara reflected on the miraculous journey that had brought them together. A desperate plea, a grieving woman's choice to love again, and two children who needed someone to believe in them. It wasn't the family she had planned, but it was perfect in ways she never could have imagined. Standing in her doorway, looking out at the star-filled prairie sky, Clara whispered a prayer of thanksgiving. Tomorrow she would accept the teaching position and begin preparing for another new chapter in their lives. There would be challenges ahead. There always were, but they would face them together. The love she had thought buried with James had simply been waiting for new soil in which to grow. And grow it had, in ways more beautiful and unexpected than any garden she had ever tended. In the end, Clara had learned that worth wasn't measured by what you'd lost, but by how you chose to love with what remained.